Today on Hearts of Heroes, a 160-year-old church goes up in flames.
You could see smoke coming from the top of the steeple.
Need a ladder.
I got a 12-footer.
I saw a heavy fire in the rear of the church.
Plus, a raging apartment fire leaves people trapped in the flames. And a team of people had to jump in to help.
Get the fire department in the ambulance.
We're trying to get a ladder up on the Ward Street side.
Whoa, hold on, wait.
My biggest fear was these victims are just gonna jump.
When a fire breaks out, priority number one for first responders is to save lives, of course, but they also have to save property.
But when a historic church went up in flames in 2020, firefighters weren't just saving a building, they were saving the town's very own history.
Newburg, New York is located on the Hudson River about 60 miles north of Manhattan. From its Victorian neighborhoods to its centuries-old architecture, it's a town steeped in American history.
The city of Newburg is an incredible collection of buildings, houses that were built in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and it's just an intriguing place to live as you drive down every street and see beautiful houses with architecture from days gone by.
The city of Newburg, it was one of the stops for General Washington during the American Revolution. He had lived in the Hasbrook House. This was a jewel of the Hudson River for many years.
Even Newburg's fire department reaches way back in time.
The fire department itself has been around for over 200 years, so the city itself and the fire department has a very long history.
In fact, the fire department still uses old-time pole boxes that are located throughout the town to alert them whenever there's an emergency.
The box alarm system was the way that 100 years ago people were able to notify the fire department of a fire in their area. And basically, it's a telegraph system that when you pull the hook, it notifies the fire department. When that alarm comes in, that number is placed on a ticker tape. We're able to read that tape and know which box it is, and we're able to respond there.
But when it comes to history and architecture, the city's true centerpiece is the Calvary Presbyterian Church. It's a beautiful cathedral that was constructed pre-Civil War.
In 1884, Thomas Edison installed lights on the top of all these columns, and it was to show investors about this new invention called electric light.
And they still actually have 2 rings of lights that are there representatively to show people what that would have looked like back in the day.
Being a hub of both worship and charitable outreach, the Calvary Church has always been an important fixture in Newburg.
We have been a church that has been very much a part of the community, but I think over the last several years, we've extended ourselves beyond the threshold of the doors.
This church is more than just a building to the community. It's an icon representative of their vast and incredible history. Without it, much of their history could be lost forever.
At around midnight on March 4th, 2020, firefighters got the call. The church was on fire.
So I pulled up on the scene. I saw a heavy fire in the rear of the church on the north side of the newer section of the church.
You could see smoke coming from the top of the steeple. And I could see the fire coming through the roof at the rear of the church.
Coming up, the fate of the Calvary Church is in the hands of heroic firefighters.
We needed to put it out before we lost the most historic portion of the building.
But first, a safety tip.
If a fire breaks out in your home or business, do you know what to do?
The rule is simple. Get out, stay out, then call 911. Also yell fire to alert others of the danger. Get away from it fast. Fire doubles in size every 2 minutes.
Make it a habit to remember those simple steps, because a simple routine could mean the difference between having gratitude or having regret.
Around midnight on March 4th, 2020, the historic Calvary Church in Newburg, New York, went up in flames. Firefighters were immediately dispatched, and when they arrived, they knew that they had a huge job ahead of them.
It's a very, very prominent church throughout the community. It's been around for a very long time.
With the fire already raging, they had to come up with a game plan to stop it from spreading.
We had a forced entry to get in, and the plan of attack was to try to minimize the fire from getting into the older section of the church, the sanctuary, so that we could possibly stop and put it out before we lost the most historic portion of the building.
The fact that this church was so old presented challenges for these first responders.
Older buildings tend to be more flammable as the wood is older. They also tend to have void spaces, and that causes the fire to spread quickly undetected. And then it's up to us to find it.
Reverend J. Edward Lewis got word of the fire and rushed to the church where he met the fire captain.
I see windows being broken out from the fire department. I still see several fire companies outside. I said, I just want to know about, the status of the fire. He said, well, the fellowship hall is burning pretty good, but we're trying to hold it off from the sanctuary.
Firefighters fought the blaze for hours, and finally they were able to quell the flames and save the main and oldest section of the building.
We were able to contain the fire for the most part in the new section of the building. Although there was some extension to the second floor, we did keep it in the one main room.
Still, the damage was extensive.
As I walked into the church after the fire, there was water, debris everywhere. So it was 3 or 4 inches of soggy mess with all the books and clothing, and it was obvious that there had been a great fire in that space.
Many people don't realize that it's not just the flames that can cause harm to a building. Smoke damage, debris, and even the water from the fire hoses need to be cleaned up after an event like this.
Our sponsor, Belfour, was brought in to take care of the cleanup and restoration.
Anytime you go into a building that has had a major fire like this, it's devastating. The building is soaking wet from the firemen. It is black, it's dark, it smells. The debris is all over the floor.
The team immediately got to work.
We cleaned the whole church, cleaned the pews. We had to set up scaffolding, clean the roof system, the trusses, and then we started on the reconstruction of the fellowship hall.
There was a silver lining to the tragedy. The Calvary Church is not only being restored, it's also being updated and modernized.
All of the lights in this space have been replaced with LED bulbs so that we can be brighter and dimmable and much more energy conscious. And we're realizing that we can provide Wi-Fi through the building, which was unheard of when the building was built. So we will be technologically up to date as we find a way to provide resources to the community.
There is something of the blessing. There's a blessing that will come out of the ashes. And I firmly believe that.
The fact that the firefighters were able to rescue this historic landmark was a blessing in itself.
I spoke to the fire chief and said, what we want to do when we come back to worship, we want to have a day of honor for firefighters. And I think I saw tears come to his eyes.
You talk about heroes. To me, that term's overused, but when you're a fireman going into a burning building, you're a hero.
Coming up,
There's a fire going, it is cooking hot.
when a fire roars through a small hamlet in Connecticut, it's volunteers that rise to the occasion.
I jumped in the truck. I hadn't even gotten all my equipment on it.
People of Vernon, Connecticut take particular pride in their all-volunteer fire department. But it's not just the first responders who are dedicated to their community.
When a fire broke out in 2021, many neighbors stepped up to help, including a nurse, a National Guard member, and even a town administrator.
The quiet little town of Vernon, Connecticut is located about 10 miles outside the capital of Hartford. Here, the people share a deep sense of pride and civic responsibility.
We have some beautiful parks, very historic. A small town, but not too small. A little bit of everything.
We're a tight-knit community. This is a great place to live, and it's a great place to volunteer.
With a modest population of just under 30,000, the city depends on their brave team of volunteer firefighters. Kevin Bowman comes from a long line of 4 generations of local firefighters.
My grandfather was the chaplain of the Vernon Fire Department, and my father was also my brother, and now currently my son.
We have the largest volunteer fire department in the state of Connecticut. We're very proud of our men and women in the volunteer fire department.
And that dedication to community would be tested one day in March of 2021.
That day I came into work and I was talking with the person I was going to be relieving at work. We were looking out the window and I happened to see the smoke.
As Brett walked out to investigate, he saw the fire just across the hospital parking lot. He immediately rushed over and called 911.
Vernon Police 911, where is your emergency?
Wood Street, there's a fire going on the back porch. It is cooking hot.
As luck would have it, Brett is not only a nurse and paramedic, but also a former firefighter.
As I'm on the phone with 911, kind of my firefighter training, first arriving unit on scene kind of thoughts start kicking in.
Because of Brett's experience as a firefighter, he knew to gather as much information as he could. He began surveying the scene to relay all the details first responders would need.
I started doing the 360. I located the fire and what side of the building it was on, but I also discovered that there was 2 people hanging out a window that were trapped.
Like the second floor's trapped. The second floor is trapped right there.
Nathan Pisani is a member of the National Guard and lives in the building next door. He smelled the smoke and headed over to help.
Get back, guys, get back.
The backside of the building had heavy visible flames going from the 2nd floor all the way up to the 3rd floor. From what I could see, primarily concentrated on the back patios. Just started banging on doors, trying to alert people that there was an active fire on the building.
By this time, Kevin had gotten a call about the fire. Not from 911, but from his barber who works up the street.
He says, do you know that there's a house on fire on Union Street? And I said, no. He goes, there's people hanging out the windows. You need to get there now.
At that time, firefighter Bowman was the only one at the station, and he knew he had no time to lose.
I jumped in the truck and I responded by myself because I could tell by the tone of his voice. And I hadn't even gotten all my equipment on at that point.
When he arrived, Brett met him at his truck.
I pulled up and he jumped right up to the side of the truck and he's screaming at me. You've got people trapped on the 3rd floor.
At that moment, Brett's firefighter training kicked in.
I went to the back of the truck, pulled the 24-foot ladder off of the truck, and started carrying it over to the building because I knew Kevin was going to need a few minutes to kind of orient himself and figure out what he needed to do.
As Brett carried the ladder to the building, Officer Allison Lawrence showed up.
When I came around the corner, I saw Brett running towards the building with a ladder. So I met him at the building and saw a male and a female hanging out the window, crying for help.
We're trying to get a ladder up on the Ward Street side.
With the smoke and flames surrounding the trapped couple, Kevin had a frightening realization.
And I started to climb the ladder and realized that it's short by like 3 feet. And I don't even have my equipment on at this point. My biggest fear was these victims are just gonna jump because they said the fire was in the room with them.
Coming up, firefighters are left with few options.
There's already heavy black smoke coming out of their window, so we know this is a one-shot deal. It's now or never.
But first, another safety tip.
Wildfires produce massive amounts of smoke, making navigating the affected area very challenging.
If you have to evacuate during a wildfire, be sure to turn on the exterior and interior lights of your home. This will help firefighters locate your building in the smoke and increases the likelihood of saving the structure.
If you're evacuating, stay safe, stay prepared, and leave a light on for these heroes. They'll appreciate it.
On the evening of March 29, 2021, a fire broke out in an apartment building in Vernon, Connecticut, trapping 2 people on the 3rd floor.
Okay.
Volunteer firefighter Kevin Bowman arrived in just minutes and was one of the only first responders on scene. Luckily, a group of heroes had also assembled.
Everybody, as soon as they got there, everybody was just doing whatever they could with whatever they had.
But as they set up the ladder to rescue the people, they realized it wasn't tall enough to reach the window.
I remember seeing these people looking down at us, and when we raised the ladder, it came up short. We're an engine company. We don't carry a whole slew of ladders, you know, that's what the ladder truck's for. So it was wild.
Just then, backup firefighters pulled up.
When we arrived at this building, you could tell it was a very large, 4-story wood frame building, and it had heavy fire from the 2nd all the way to the 3rd floor on the exterior porches.
Vernon Town Administrator Michael Percaro was at his office nearby when he heard about the fire. He also raced over to help.
There was just a flurry of activity happening because the building was burning very quickly, and it was pretty clear that people needed to respond that were there as quickly and efficiently as possible.
But there was still the question of how to get the frightened couple down from the burning building.
The challenge was just the amount of smoke that was pushing out from behind the victims, because usually it's smoke that gets to victims before fire does.
There was really only one option: work with what they had.
We're gonna make this work. We don't have a choice. There's already heavy black smoke coming out of their window, so we know this is a one-shot deal. It's now or never. This is going to work.
Once again, bystanders did whatever they could to take part. Nathan held one side of the ladder, while Michael held the other. Officer Lawrence stood behind the ladder, holding on to keep it from falling away from the wall.
I put a pack on and I go up the ladder, and there was a young lady that was hanging out of that 3rd-story window.
With the top floor of the building crumbling, firefighter Blake St. John climbed up to rescue the woman fast.
She was very anxious, rightfully so. So I had to kind of brace her onto the ladder and kind of support her legs as we got onto the rungs, just because there was a high risk of falling. So I wanted to make sure she was safe.
Once her feet were securely on the top rung, firefighter St. John escorted her down the ladder.
What I saw when I held onto that ladder was pure heroism. I saw Officer Allison Lawrence holding that ladder with her back to the building while burning embers, debris from the building was falling on her head. Literally at one point, panes of glass were smashing over the top of her head.
Next, firefighter Stan Landry climbed up to rescue the man, who was understandably agitated.
Very excited, anxious, a little hesitant to come out on the ladder until I got up there, but as soon as I was there, he was pretty much willing to come out. He was ready to go.
Smoke inhalation, I take it, or you got any other injuries?
The couple suffered some smoke inhalation, but were otherwise, and thankfully, fine. After the rescue was over, Brett approached firefighter Bowman.
He says, is there anything else that I can do for you? And I said, do you know how to dress a fire hydrant? He goes, I do. I said, go over there and help that guy with it.
After he finished his hero's work at the fire, Reinhardt went back and finished his shift at the hospital.
I told him before he left, I said, I need your information. I wanted to make sure this guy got recognized. I would have been in big trouble without him that day.
With the help of these good Samaritans, firefighters were able to safely rescue everybody from the building. Recently, Sheldon Yellen, from our sponsor, Belfour Property Restoration, had the opportunity to meet this unique group of heroes.
Chief, you know, we spoke earlier, and you've talked about how heroic these actions are. Tell me what you feel about all these people.
This just exemplifies the word hero, the word selflessness, the word helping others. To have perfect strangers come up to other people in their time of need. We had a horrific situation, people trapped, the right people in the right place at the right time, and it just all came together and everybody made it out.
I couldn't be more proud of the work of these humble heroes. Officer Lawrence, when I was holding the ladder, there was window pane pieces smashing on her head, and Brett putting the ladder there. Firefighter Bowman is a one-man band. He did the work of 4 or 5 firefighters by himself because he knew he had to get done. That's humble heroism.
It's not an ideal situation by any means, but given what we had to work with, we had to make that work.
If I could just take a minute on behalf of millions and millions of people across this country to say thank you to you guys, because you made an oath, you made a commitment, and you do it without consciously thinking about it. It's your normal reaction. Please accept our gratitude. Thank you, guys. I mean it. Thank every one of you. Thank you. Officer, thank you. Nate, thank you. Brett,
Thank you.
good man.
Thank you.
Chief,
Thank you for getting the stories out. It's important.
Thank you. Facing any disaster can be trying and an emotional experience.
But in the events that we've seen today, we also often get a real crash course in gratitude, seeing the best in people, even if they are complete strangers. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.